wasn't really a clown. I worked for the carnival.
She worked at the
But
carnival.
he thought it was the circus. So
Hey,
he kept
Ed,
telling me I was a
Ed,
clown.
While she was traveling all over the country doing carnival, people would ask
It's
me,
better.
so
Okay.
where's your aunt? He'd say, she's here. He'd say, well, what does she do? She's a clown. They weren't wrong.
And my dad used to say that. My dad had twin brothers, and he used to say he would be the catcher and all this stuff. And my sister-in-law believed it for, I don't know, like almost 20 years.
Yeah.
All right, I think we got the bugs worked out, I think.
Okay.
That's the first time that's happened. I had that chipmunky sound. I was panicking a little bit. I stopped, anyway.
You always have a chipmunky sound.
We'll get it working, because next week, so I can't talk next week.
This
so
guy,
I'll
just ignore him today. I don't know what his problem is.
Think about not streaming anymore so I can have words. If we lose connection, if you're watching this, you'll know why.
So when you listen to a recording of Alvin and the Chipmunks,
Yeah.
how many voices do you hear?
Do you know when the last time I've listened to Alvin and the Chipmunks was?
Four.
It's been decades.
Alvin and the Chipmunks, you hear four.
Okay.
I only hear one. David Seville is all those voices. It was just remixed.
Yeah, we knew that.
You
All
knew
right,
that?
we did. All right, hi Laura.
Hi, Laura.
We need to just move along to, they can have their own conversation, but you and I, we could talk Ecclesiastes. All right, so I really like this quote. I'm just going to just throw it up there on the screen again. It was from McLaren's expository or expositions. It just reminds us that the book of Ecclesiastes is a voyage. It's a journey. It's some of the thoughts from, right, the words of the preacher, as he says there in chapter 1. And he deals with some of his personal struggles, just some of the things that he observed. And so he was just working his way through those things until he gets to the conclusion, which is John's favorite chapter of the book. But it's a good chapter. But so we're working along the way with him. I said last week I messed up that outline. I just glanced at it. I didn't mess it up. It's a good outline. The first 11 verses is the intro.
I needed the other one.
What's that?
Could you please go back one slide?
Oh, you want to go back one slide? Sure, no problem. There you go. But then I have a question for you, Addison, so be ready for the question. Snap a picture of the quote? Sure you can. I'll move out of the way. Or you can always get a screenshot later. But that's whatever. I feel like I got paparazzi in the audience taking pictures of me. Doesn't happen very often. Did you get it? All right, so here's the basic outline we've gone through thus far. Chapter 1, starting in verse number 1, going through verse number 11. He just makes some general observations, or he observes there's a problem. And actually, we're going to go back and look at that problem, if we have time, in one of these questions a little bit later. In the rest of chapter 1 and chapter 2, he shares some of his own personal struggles, some of the things that he was trying to do to seek out happiness. As we've noticed along the way, those things don't make a person happy, and you're going to keep searching for happiness like Solomon did, but he figured it out eventually. Chapters 3 through chapter 6, he shares some things that confused him about life, and that's where we're at tonight. That's where we were at last week. That's where we're going to be at tonight, chapter 4. Just some general observations. In fact, let me just highlight from chapter 3, God's plan can't be changed, and we looked at that in detail last week. He looked at the human affairs, the way they change, verses 1 through 10. There's a season for everything, right? There's the good and there's bad, and everything seems to balance out. There's all these cycles.
Salt.
What's that?
There's a season for everything. Salt.
That's coming soon. The divine counsels are unchangeable. God's counsels, we can't add to or take away from God's divine will, can we? We cannot change it. And then the vanity of worldly power. And it's kind of a continuation of thought here in chapter 4. In chapter 4, he notices some unfairness of life. And I don't know if as I was going through this, I was like, maybe a lot of us can say, yeah, we can understand where Solomon was coming from in some of these things. There's misery from oppression. that he viewed, verses 1 through 3. Envy and covetousness, verses 4 through 8. And the importance of companionship, verses 9 through 12. And then popularity doesn't last. It doesn't last forever, verses 13 through 16, the end of the chapter. Addison, the question that I was going to ask you, not to interrupt your writing, but I know a couple of weeks ago you said that it looked a little blurry on the screen. Does it look any better with the black background? I changed. Still blurry? I wonder why. All right. So as we were kind of making small talk, and one person said chapter 3 was, they really enjoyed chapter 3. John said he really liked chapter 12. I jokingly said I liked chapter 4, but I was joking because if you remember back a few weeks ago in our intro, I said that this was the chapter that Jody and I did that split devotional up at Bible camp. So that was fitting that we said we'd split tonight. And anyway, I don't know if she remembers that or not, but yeah. Good times. The funny thing is the preacher guy was done before she was. I mean, how does that work? Anyway, chapter 4. It's a good chapter. So let's read it. It's not
from sun to sun. Woman's work is never done.
Oh, I hope YouTube didn't hear that. He could be the one to get himself in trouble this week. I'm going to watch myself. All right, so chapter 4 is kind of a short chapter, right? 16 verses. Let's read through it, and then we'll get to the questions and answers. So verse number 1 says, "Then I returned and considered all the oppression that is done under the sun. And look, the tears of the oppressed, but they have no comforter. On the side of their oppressors there is power, but they have no comforter. Therefore I praise the dead who were already dead, more than the living who are still alive. Yet better than both is he who has never existed, who has not seen the evil work that is done under the sun. Again, I saw that for all toil and every skillful work a man is envied by his neighbor. This also is vanity and grasping for the wind. The fool folds his hands and consumes his own flesh. Better a handful with quietness than both hands full together with toil and grasping for the wind. Then I returned, and I saw vanity under the sun. There is one alone without companion. He has neither son nor brother, yet there is no end to all his labors. Nor is his eye satisfied with riches, but he never asks, 'For whom do I toil and deprive myself of good?' This also is vanity and a grave misfortune. 2 are better than 1, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion, but woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. Again, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm, but how can one be warm alone? Though one may be overpowered by another, 2 can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. Better a poor and wise youth than an old and foolish king who will be admonished no more, for he comes out of prison to be king. Although he was born poor in his kingdom, I saw all the living who walk under the sun. They were with the second youth who stands in his place. There was no end of all the people over whom he was made king, yet those who come afterward will not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and grasping for the wind." So I was just reading through there, and something that just jumped out at me is, I know we said later on some of these are like proverbs, short little statements, and some of these as well sound very proverbial, I guess you could say.
2 are better than 1.
Yeah, we'll get there. I love that section. Question number 1, what does Solomon consider in verse 1a?
Well, the oppression that is done under the sun.
Okay, the oppression that's done under the sun. So the oppression that he's talking about would be tyranny. Do I need to move, Addison?
Do you want me to take a picture of it again?
Well, sure. Pardon me, I'll be right back.
Be right back after these messages.
After we watch this commercial message.
Do I need to pause?
That should work.
Okay.
No.
You could do it to
Well,
Don.
I can always get you the picture later.
Give her to Don, point to it.
Email them the slide.
I did, yeah.
All right.
Okay, so he's talking about tyranny. Now, he could be referring to judges, right? Those that were overseeing the judicial system. Do you remember back in chapter 3, he was talking about some of the corrupt judges? At verse number 16, so that was from last week. Or he could just be talking about prominent, powerful people and how they oppressed the poor. Does any of that go on today?
Yes.
Yeah, it sure does. And so we might sit back and we might be like Solomon and say, why does this happen? We kind of know why it happens, right? But we still might ponder it and wonder, well, why does it continue to happen? Why does it... when Solomon's overseeing this, just this observation, the injustice and the violence that's going on in the land, I think it made him sad, maybe a little bit frustrated that this was going on. Question number 2, what did he quote, look at? This is why I think it made him sad.
Tears of the oppressed.
All right, the tears of the oppressed, verse
1b.
1b, all right.
Because they have no comforter.
Because they had no...
That's number 3.
Number 3, that's the latter part, John. Thanks for answering before we ask the question. I'm going to have to send him out to see the principal. Or,
I use it there and then turn around and use it again.
okay, so what did the oppressed not have?
No comforter.
No comforter. Yeah, so how many times does he say they had no comforter, right? It's twice. So, okay, I'll give John a pass on this. So 1B and 1C. So the point here is that it's not that. Is there anything wrong with power? Is there anything wrong with maybe a person being in leadership?
No, it's the abuse of power that causes some issues.
Okay, so isn't there that famous saying that absolute power corrupts absolutely? So that's what's going on here. And so again, we think back to that popular saying in Ecclesiastes, there's nothing new under the sun, right? And it's still going on. History is still continuing to repeat itself. Question number 4, who did Solomon praise? From verse 2.
2a.
What's that?
Yeah, 2a.
My answer continues through the entire next word.
Dead who are already dead.
Anybody else other than John?
The dead, who are already dead.
Okay, so he praised those that were already dead. Yes, he does acknowledge that verse 3, right? The better that they had never existed. But do you think he's talking about like the death of a sinner? Do you think that's really what he's talking about there? Could he say that they're better off? I don't think so.
Other scripture refers to that.
A sinner dead is better off?
It would be better if they had never known the word than to know the word and depart.
I thought that was a Christian that fell
But
away.
but again, he's saying that you're in better shape if you never knew, if you were that absolute sinner and stayed in that absolute sinner state. You're better. Why? Because you had no choice. You stayed in that state.
Okay, well, I don't think he's talking about the eternal state of a sinner.
Okay.
But there could be from the perspective of they're better off and the fact that they're not being oppressed anymore. But I don't know. Revelation 14:13 says, "Blessed are those who died in the Lord, because they're going to rest from their labors." So,
I think if we read this in the context of what he's talking about, it definitely sounds more like it's like a physical, they're better off physically, not necessarily spiritually.
Right,
They're not
yeah.
in the sufferings of this life anymore, versus a person who's continuing on in their toils and not getting the rewards for it.
and he does go on to say, verse 3, it's better. It would have been better if they had never been born, because.
And I asked a question of myself at that point. Why? who has not seen the evil works that have been done under the sun. That's the reason why it would be better that they never existed. They would
Because
never-
then they wouldn't have suffered
Wouldn't have
that
known.
oppression and yep. Yeah, that kind of reminded me of Job, right? Just questioning his birth and like,
Yeah.
man, just had I not been born, I wouldn't be sitting here suffering at this time. And so, I mean, he is really deep going through this, right? Thinking this through and just feeling sad for the people that are out there suffering in the world. But-
In my references in my center column, for those verses there, it gives Job chapter 3, 17 and 18.
So, but here's a question that we're probably not going to get the answer to. But Solomon's a king. Couldn't he have changed some of those oppressions?
Yes.
So maybe that reflection, as an older man, he's observing it, and maybe he's thinking to himself, maybe I should have done more to have changed that. And so maybe he's feeling some guilt for not intervening there. And do we do that as we reflect on life? We look back and we regret some of the choices that we made. All right, so that kind of ends that particular section. Question number 5, what else had Solomon seen?
For toil and every skillful work a man does is envied by his neighbor.
Okay, so it kind of returns back to the question from chapter 1, verse 3. Somebody want to turn back there and read that for us?
For what profit has a man for all his labors, which is he has toils under the sun?
So toiling under the sun is just living on this earth, right? Without God, and just, what's the point of all this? What's the profit of it? And here he says in chapter 4, verse 4, you're going to work hard for it, and your neighbors are going to envy you. So in a godless world, sinners envy, don't they? Sinners resent other people's success. Aren't we reminded in Romans, I believe is it chapter 12, that says you rejoice with those that rejoice? So we shouldn't be resentful of other people, good things that happen to people. But he says godless, worldly people behave in that way. Christians should not behave in that, have that type of demeanor. All right, question number 6 is everybody's favorite kind of question. It's a fill in the blank, except for John. He tends to struggle with these. So if somebody want to read that for us, all of it, and then fill it in as you
The
go.
fool folds his hands and consumes his own flesh. Better a handful with quietness than both hands full, together with toil and grasping for the wind.
All right, so the fool folds his hands and consumes his own flesh. What is Solomon talking about? Cannibalism? So do we speak that way today? Maybe, kind of, sort of.
Well, maybe when we say don't beat yourself up over it.
Okay.
So I mean, this would be kind of the same thing. You don't literally beat yourself up, but maybe folding your hands and devouring yourself. Maybe it's, I could have done better, or, I got to do more. I mean, it might be
Well,
an unsettlingness inside. Beating
The
yourself up.
contemplative thought.
contemplative thought. All right. Here's another. Is it a euphemism? Figure of speech that we sometimes use. How about eat your heart out?
Sure.
Right? So we're not really.
Really doing that.
So the fool, what they're doing here is they're folding your hands. Is the idea of they're being lazy, and they're just they're not really working. They're not doing anything, and then they're
I could do so much better. I could do so many things. Yeah,
and it's eating them up, right? I mean, that's the way we would say it. So, all right, next question is a true and false question. Solomon saw the virtue under the sun, verse number 7.
False.
Dan.
Wait a minute, you misquoted that, said verse number 8.
I didn't say the number. I said true or false is the next question. Solomon saw the virtue under the sun, and the answer again was
False.
False. So he saw vanity. So virtue is something that's praiseworthy, something that's of high moral standards. And he says, no, that's not what he saw. He saw vanity. So that particular question number 8, was from verse number 7. All right, we're going to move on to question number 9, or number 8, however you want to date it, or number it. What is the eye not satisfied with? From verse
Number 8.
Verse number 8. Does the Bible talk a lot about riches, money? Is there anything wrong with being rich?
No.
In and of itself? Can you name some rich men that were godly men? Abraham, very, very rich. Job, yep, very rich. Was there anybody rich in the New Testament that helped Jesus out?
Yes.
Okay, what was his name?
Cornelius.
I don't know how rich he was, but I know of.
He was a centurion.
Well, he
I was
was.
thinking of the man that gave up his tomb.
Yeah, what was his name?
Joseph.
Joseph of Arimathea. Yeah, very good. All right, so there's nothing wrong with riches per se, but it's how Solomon was rich, though he struggled. May not be a good example, but anyway, the eye is not satisfied with riches. What does that mean?
It wants more.
Most of the time, the rich are never satisfied.
You're never satisfied with it.
Do you remember when we got so excited to have the little tiny Palm Pilot? We wouldn't be happy with that today.
I don't know. Some people would because it was pretty retro. It was pretty.
Palm Pilot.
It was pretty cool.
I'd like to have one.
But the charger's gone. You probably can't even get a charger for it anymore. I'm like, that's sad. But anyway.
Back in the time, that was like riches.
Yeah.
We got all of our
Yeah.
government stuff on there.
Well, that's.
Remember when you first got your Commodore 64?
Oh yeah. Have you seen the ads for those computers that are like for $1,000 they had like 10 megabytes of hard drive space? Anyway, you're always going to want more, right? That's the thing with humanity. That's why Apple is really good about selling their products. They'll release a new iPhone, and even though it doesn't really change, you got the diehards out there that just. Our phone that's probably 3-4 years old, maybe 5 years by now. I could do a lot of the same stuff as the. Anyway, isn't that kind of the idea why Jesus was talking about in John chapter 4? He's talking with the Samaritan woman at the well. Jesus wanted a drink of water. And then she says, but you don't have anything to get the water. And then he says, well, if you knew the one who was questioning you, you would be asking for the living water. And then she says, well, that doesn't make sense. And Jesus, the point he's making, and then he says, if you drink this water, you're going to thirst again. And isn't that the way humanity is? You get money. Money's good. We need to have money to be able to survive, pay the bills, get food, and all the necessary things. But it seems like the more we have, the more we want. Doesn't it seem like that? Or am I alone in this?
Everything faster, better, newer.
Yep. You know, 1 John 2, verse 16, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, it's the pride of life. That's the way the devil tempted Adam and Eve in the garden from the very beginning. He's still doing it today.
Those were the 3 temptations that he used against Jesus also, that we have recorded.
And it's such a good temptation, right, that he still uses it because that entices people. Can this mindset, not being satisfied, enter into the church?
Absolutely.
Does James address this in James chapter 4? Remember, he's writing to Christians who have been scattered. James 4, verses 1 through 3, he asks a question, where did quarrels and fights come from amongst you? And what is it? James chapter 4, verses 1 through 3.
Desires for pleasure. Lust.
It's the jealousy. It's the envy. It's not obeying the command of rejoicing with others. It's being envious of other people. Yes, Addison.
What was the other verse that you?
John 4:13. And, and James even goes further there in James 4, verses 1 through 3. And he says, sometimes you don't get stuff because you're not asking God for it. But then sometimes you're not getting it because you want to use it for your own personal things. And so God knows why we're asking, right? Somebody said Sunday that I should be telling people how much I like Corvettes. But if I prayed for God to give me a Corvette, it'd probably be for nefarious reasons or for selfish reasons, and God's not going to bless me for that, right? Even though we need vehicles to get to and from places. That's why we got to be careful of what we ask for. We got to make sure that and sometimes it's tough, right, that what we're praying about is for God's will, if that makes sense. John, you look like you're contemplating this. No? All right. You're good? All right. If you're good, I'm good. All right, question number 10. What's, quote, better than one and why?
2, because they have a good reward for their labor. When one falls down, the companion will lift him up, and they keep each other warm when they lie down.
All right, so what verses did you find that in?
9 and 10.
9, 10, and 11.
All right, 9, 10. I added 11 in there as well.
11.
So these sections, right? This really 9 through 12 is about companionship. Is companionship important?
Yes.
Is friendship important? And do you have to be careful of the friends that you make?
Absolutely.
How about working together? Isn't that what all these verses right here are talking about? Cooperation. Think about cooperation, we think about unity, right? Solomon talks about 2 are better than 1. Maybe you've thought about this, but when Jesus sent out the apostles on that limited commission, how did he send them out? Or Mark chapter 6, verse 7. He sent them out 2 by 2. Why do you think he would send them out in pairs?
So that they had a
Support
companion.
each other.
It's much easier to have that support and stand up and be bold than to do it on your own.
Yep. That's right. So
Even today, when we go out, we go out too. Even when I did the busing program here, I always carried someone with me when I went to do visitation for my kids out riding the bus, so that anything you encounter, you don't have somebody come back and say, "Oh, he did this," and if you don't have a witness,
witnesses, absolutely, that's right. Verse number 11, companionship and friendships can save a person's life. Mm-hmm. So I've heard people try to say, they try to make this, I'm trying to say this in a PG-13 way, they try to make it kind of dirty sounding. Okay, I'm just going to say it. They try to make it sound sexual. It's not. Have you heard of stories about people breaking down in the middle of winter and they have to huddle up in order to stay warm? And that, body heat, so companionship, friendship can actually save your life. Can a Christian friend actually help save another person's spiritual life, their soul?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Question number 11 ties into this. What is a threefold cord?
Not quickly broken.
That's not what I asked. I said, what's a threefold cord? It's a triple braided cord with 3 strands. That's what the answer was.
Yeah.
What I put.
That's what you put?
That's what I put.
Yes,
A rope
young
with 3
ladies,
strands braided together.
We did this at AHG, didn't we?
That's what I put.
demonstrated
Not
that.
quickly broken.
And then I added, it's not quickly broken. All right, verse number...
Yeah, we did that.
I think I should-
I held onto a rope, and I had the 3 strands I was holding onto, and the girls had 3 girls, one in each direction, trying to pull, and they couldn't pull. And I said, now, why don't you become unified and come together? They came together, and 1 man versus 3 young ladies is not enough.
Yeah. So here's a question. If 2 are valuable, how much more valuable is there more than 2?
3.
but how much more value is that? It's kind of a rhetorical
Definitely
question.
More valuable.
More valuable.
Yeah.
As long as they are
The unified.
unified,
Yes.
the
We're-
threefold cord.
Yeah,
And
Where
where two or three are gathered in my
Two that are
name.
unified and one is trying to break.
So the context there is about church discipline, and when there's two or more that are addressing this issue, you know that God's with you in dealing with that problem. And so, absolutely.
How can, another scripture, the verse that how can two walk together except they what?
They have to be agreed. Yeah, Amos 3:3. So, you look at this section and a lot of commentaries. I think the Thompson Chain reference has over in the side margin, if I remember this right, the word community. Right? How important is community? And is the church a community?
Yes.
Yes. It better be.
Have we kind of?
Yes, we have gone away from being a strong community like we were at some time.
So why do you think that is? Let me just. Why might have we?
Because
Sadly.
the world has corrupted us, and that ideal that the world has of self-importance has kind of come into the church, and we've started to individualize, well, my needs are important, and instead of the community's needs, the individual has become more important.
So that issue has been addressed by several. Some have commercialized church, looking for a church home. They come in, so, well, what are you going to do for me? When really it's about the collective and helping one another. Is there any other thoughts on this? Because I could share you my personal opinions. I wonder if sometimes we just kind of we forget what church is. We think of church as being the building, and we come to the building to go through the 5 acts of worship, and then as soon as the 5 acts are done, we're out of here. And
A lot of times, unfortunately, it's looked at as a business instead of a family.
okay, so looking at it from a business perspective as opposed to a family. Somebody read for me, please. 1 Peter 2, verse 17. 1 Peter 2, verse 17.
Honor all people, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king.
All right. So there's one translation out there, and it's not a very common translation. But if you use the Logos Bible software, and there's other Bible programs that have it, on the Lexham English Bible, you can't even buy it in a hard copy. It's all electronic. They're the only translation that I know of that when it says love the brotherhood, it translates that as love the community. I do like that, because shouldn't we love the community? Shouldn't we love one another? We've got to be part of the community in order to be in the community. Any other thoughts, comments?
That's phileo,
Yeah.
okay? And that's the whole concept behind phileo, kinship. We're all related.
We're all related. And then,
And when you say all, it's not just the members at Hazel Park or the members at Parkview or Royal Oak or wherever. It's the church as a whole, which I think is another thing that we're divided into these smaller communities instead of remembering that we're one community. We're one family.
so we have that phileo love, but the highest love is the agape love, which is the self-sacrifice that I will do anything. I think about the Marines. Once a Marine, you're always a Marine. That is a community. That is a family. And that's the way the church ought to be, right? And you do see that oftentimes a person's traveling maybe across the United States or whatever. Don't want anything bad to happen to you, but if you're out there on the road and you need help, you have a community out there that you can look up, and there will be somebody out there that will help you. And that's a good feeling to have.
Yes.
The Marine Corps motto is not doesn't belong to them. It belongs to the church, because the Marine Corps motto is Semper Fidelis. meaning always faithful, is talking to us.
Yep. As you travel over to South Carolina and you meet people that, you have people in common, right? So family. That's the way it should be.
That was the Lexham English
Lexham
Bible?
English, yep, LEB. YouVersion has it on there. I think Bible Gateway may have it, but you can't get a hard copy of it. I've looked, and they don't print them. I'd love to have a printed copy of it.
In Key West, because it's a tourist town, anybody that needs help, any Christian always calls. We help people all the time down there.
So there's a Bible reference in Galatians, I think it's 5, that says, do good to all men.
Yeah.
Do good to all men, especially the household of faith. So.
And the early church was, I wish we could go back to that example where, I'm not necessarily saying we should sell all our goods, but they sold everything to make sure that they were all taken care of. And I think a lot of times we come in the building, we're like, hey, how you doing? And, oh, you said you were okay, so I'm going to assume you're okay. And we don't really know that our brothers or our sisters are struggling and that they have needs of food or clothing or spiritual needs, and we really aren't, as a family, checking in on them like you do with your children in your home or your sister. You call them up, That's how we should be as a family.
And I think Chuck and I have talked a little bit about this. It seems like back in the day, people of like mind like this, they would live closer together. It was like neighborhoods, right?
Yes.
And now we're all of us are kind of
usually-
distanced from.
Yeah, usually when people move away, then they go to a different church.
Yeah.
Church of Christ is
Yeah.
a different one.
Yeah.
And so you have to give credit to the people that come quite a ways
Yes.
Oh yeah.
here. Like Leo and Jean come quite a ways, and Bill and Sarah, and different people come quite a ways to, like Fern driving herself from as far away as she is.
So we love the community, right? Yep. So even though some may travel a long ways away, and we worship at Hazel Park Church of Christ, our community is kind of around here. We can't forget this. Just throwing that out there. All right, verses 13 through the end of the chapter here, he talks about popularity. This is really great for young people. All right, I'm talking to the young table now. Don't y'all wish you? Popularity is fickle. It doesn't last forever. What does fickle mean?
Fading.
Changes quickly. We see that in this section. Question number 12. Who was, quote, better? Verse 13.
Poor and wise youth.
Than who?
Than foolish
And
king.
old and foolish king.
Okay. Why are they better than the old and foolish king? Because what would that old foolish king not do?
Doesn't possess wisdom.
All right.
He's not wise.
He can't be admonished anymore. That's what Solomon is saying here. So the foolish king is foolish because he refuses to listen to advice. What kind of person might we say that person is? If you give somebody advice and they don't listen to you, what?
Stubborn, for one.
Stubborn. All right. So this foolish king would be a stubborn type of person. So we're given an example of some fickleness here in verses 14 and 15. One youth would go from poverty and, let me just, before I read that, because anyway. Question 13, who did Solomon see living? Who?
Walked under the sun, they were with the second youth who stands in his place.
All right, verse
15.
15. So here's some of that fickleness going on. He says that there's this youth, right, from poverty. This guy was born in poverty. Maybe something caused him to end up in jail. Maybe we could imply from that maybe he was poor and maybe he was stealing food in order to eat. Kind of reminds me of, is that Les Mis? That's kind of the premise for that. Anyway, this guy ends up in jail for whatever reason. He comes out. And then he becomes popular, the people love him, and then he becomes king. And the crowd of people, right, who supported the king at one time, are now supporting somebody else who rose up in power. Isn't that kind of what happens in the music world?
Mhm.
You have somebody that's popular for 6 months, a year, maybe 2 years, and then all of a sudden they begin to get a little bit older, and then there's some other 17, 18, 19-year-old kid and then all of a sudden everybody gravitates towards them, and then that person rises in popularity, and the person that was one time popular just kind of goes away, and I'm not going to say oblivion, because there might be some people out there that still like them, but they just kind of fade away in the distance, right? The people that were popular 100 years ago in Hollywood and music and stuff, are they really popular today? Like really popular? We might know we may know them, but are they really popular? Like if you were to pull out some of those old names,
Wouldn't know them. So like
Charlie Chaplin's
some
not
like
popular
that.
today?
probably
Like
not.
Frank
But you may know him, but there are certain people, like sitting at the young people's table, they might be like, who? Or Buster Keaton, right? I mean, some may.
But like it's not like popular like everybody knows.
Like
Yeah,
all over
when you
the
think about popular,
Like
right? You think of the homecoming king and queens in school. It was the popular kids that always won. It wasn't anyway. That's what's going on here. Everybody liked the king. We'd say it this way: everybody likes this politician. And then he has power for a short time, and then there's a new young buck coming up, and then all of a sudden we like that guy, he's good looking, he's funny, he's charismatic, so we'll vote him into office. 8 years later, that guy that once had brown hair now has starched white hair, and he's not so good looking anymore, but there's another 30-year-old, 40-year-old guy coming up through Senate and the Congress, and then he gets voted in. It's not necessarily... And then they have handlers behind the scenes telling them what to say and what the polls and all that. There's nothing new under the sun. It just keeps, it's the same old cycle, right? It just keeps on going. More I read the Ecclesiastes, the more I want to go to the woods. Anyway, question number 14. What else was vanity and grasping for the wind?
Those who came after him.
Will not rejoice in the king.
I said popularity.
Okay.
King's life.
Okay.
Because none of the people who once supported him continue even remember him. Like they're
All good answers.
rejoicing.
All good answers. Very good. And verse number 16, so the last verse. So he's saying there's going to be another generation that comes up, and they're going to forget the king, current king, past kings, and it just keeps going on and on, right, with new generations that come and go. All right, question number 15. How many times are the words vain, vanity, or vanities found in this particular chapter, chapter 4?
4.
Right, that's kind of fitting. 4 times, chapter 4. Can you give me the verse numbers?
Verse
4,
4,
7, 8, and 16.
4, 7, 8.
She beat you. She
got it. Anita, I was reading off Nita's page, not mine.
All right, here's the bonus question. People have been anticipating this one all night long. What number did the teacher intentionally skip? I was thinking originally, what question number I should have.
7.
All right,
Verse 3.
number 7.
Yeah.
Question.
Verse 3.
Why?
Okay.
For
I have a
fun.
question. A bonus
For
question.
fun. Now, I put the word intentionally in there because I didn't want anybody to think, I think at first it was a typo. But actually I changed the number. I changed the number just because of psychology. But anyway, that was last week. I can't remember all the things behind it. But I wrote the word intentionally in there because I didn't want anybody to go, oh, you wrote a typo. I found your typo. No, it was intentional. And then I wrote down in here in question marks, maybe 16. I didn't put 16 on the sheet, and that was the bonus question. But I wrote that right before class.
Oops,
I can't.
no, number 7.
Yeah, you wrote it on your sheet.
right on my sheet.
You whoop. See, you thought I did it on purpose. That's
I
why.
know you did.
Once you got to the end, but
No.
whatever, John. I'm not going to argue with you. All right, guys, very good class. I got to go eat. I got to get out of here.
You're very analytical. By the way,
I'm done with this
if you-
community for
if you-
tonight.
if you-
I'm just kidding.
If you took that, if you took that in the sense of what question, where did you not get a question from, number 14 would be the answer.
And number 3.
That's not
Well,
right.
number 3, I fits in very perfectly.
See, I said verse 3 too. He added his own thing, which we'll give him a pass. She does, and I saw her. It's amazing what teachers see. Go ahead, Addison.
I was just gonna say that Valina says hi too.
Hey, Valina.
She's asking for prayers for one of her family members that has something serious going on health-wise, and they're gonna be doing more tests.
Okay, so remember to pray for Valina's friend. And when we're done here, Dad, can I have you say the prayer? I'll turn the microphone around for. Just speak loud. Remember the high school days.
I don't know.
I remember those days.
I think anything that you're sitting there doing that might be too taxing.
I'd like that prayer for my family too.
Jody's family as well. Let's see, Chloe, you had your hand up. I saw you. Oh, you were going to tell me that. All right. All right, very good. So any other thoughts, comments, questions? Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, it's been an interesting class as usual. You turn the volume up real loud. You'll hear John in the background.
That's the only thing, I won't be able to talk. You have to type it, so then I can't type unless I'm on a computer, right?
Yeah, that's.
Yeah,
Well,
I
you
do
could.
off the TV.
Oh, okay. Well, you get on your phone and type.
Oh, I can?
Yeah, what
Yeah.
we usually do is I put mine on the TV and then one of the girls has theirs and they just type their thing, so.
Yeah. Technology, it's amazing. But if you need tech support, you got a few guys in your
Yeah.
family that you can call them up and they'll help you.
No, my husband. My brother was in that stuff years ago. He's old now.
All right, Dad, it's your turn if you're ready. Real loud. Here, there we go. Let me aim it towards you.
Be too loud then.
I don't know about that.
Father in heaven, we're so thankful for this great lesson we heard tonight. Thankful, Father, that we could take part in it. Pray, Father, now for all the sick of our congregation who are not able to be with us. Continue to bless Jody's aunt. Make her well, Father, if it be thy will. Father, continue to bless Sister. We've gone on a trip to Florida. Going to stay in there for a few days, a few months. Bless her, Father, and watch over them all. Father, continue to bless all of us and help us through this night. All these new blessings we ask in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Bye, Vera.